Fellow Redditors, what was a moment where you thought a person you knew might be an actual psychopath? I don't know if it's outrageous, but it did put me into tears a few times. We had one boy who was casebook autistic, very stimmy, toe walking, sensory issues up the wazoo, constant pattern and repetition. He was nonverbal, which is why his parents enrolled him into our school, specializing in disability. They were hoping he would get speech therapy. The first month this kid was here, the staff involved with him brought the parents into a meeting to discuss having him assessed for autism. And the mother laughed and said no, he doesn't have that, he's just a late speaker. The parents were adamant that he just had a speech delay, and refused to have him tested. This meant that the kid would only get minimal funding, which means he would only get minimal therapy. This was the SLP coming in every other week to work with him for 15 minutes on PECs. It killed me because I loved this kid. He was an absolute goon and we hit it off pretty well. And to not be able to put the resources that were needed so he could learn to cope with his sensory issues, find a way to express his needs and wants, and give him a proper sense of security in the world frustrated me to the point where I ended up having a meltdown with him. Which looking back is kind of darkly hilarious if you picture me partially restraining him while he screams and cries, and I'm screaming and crying along with him. It was not a good day for anyone. Eventually, near the end of January, the mom specifically asked me for a meeting. This scared the crap out of me, but she sat down with me and asked to have the whole autism thing explained. A week after that, the parents asked for their son to be assessed, and then we were able to start giving him the support and therapy he needed. A good end. How rare. I had a father who had recently immigrated from India tell me that I had permission to beat his son if he misbehaved again. I also had a mother once tell me, in all seriousness, that I ought to cover her daughter's mouth with duct tape if she couldn't stop chatting during class. To the father's defense, that's how crap was done back in the day. He never had this problem with Mr. Dart. Be your mouth breather was mentioned by name in the note he left. Don't act like it's news to you that you've raised a hellraiser. My mom was a preschool teacher and was doing an annual activity making gingerbread houses at a local school. The teacher whose class she was in for the day kept trying to cut in and taking over her activity. After my mom told her to stop cutting in, the teacher said, "You are just a preschool teacher." What do you know? My mom was so livid she never did her annual activity again. Last year, parent to child who had a huge problem with cutting and shouting foul words. B. Get your butt over here. Why can't you behave like your sister? As the 9-year-old sister proceeded to draw on my wall with a crayon. Seriously, this year? Well, it's your fault for making him do things he didn't want to do. I was having a student do his simple worksheet, and he exploded and punched, kicked, and spit on me. 5 times, 5 separate days. Yes, I filed charges. Yes, he went to juvie. I work in South Texas. My school has a population of 99% Hispanic, 1 white girl. Population is also 84% economically disadvantaged. The boy was 13 and self-diagnosed bipolar and autistic. Every doctor that saw him disagreed with this diagnosis, but the school still listed him as OHI, so he got special care. I never hit him back, but I did restrain him on 9 occasions, 4 hours at a time. 9 and still drawing on walls. Dang son. Parent of a high school freshman, my son is struggling so much. Can you send home a copy of the test ahead of time so he can prepare? Insert grumpy cat note meme. But my favorite, from a different mom, also of a high school freshman, was, can you, the teacher who has 130 students every day, make sure he puts his homework in his homework folder every day? I want him to be better organized, but I just don't have the time. I have 5 kids. I'm not the teacher, but my cousin told us this crap he said to his daughter's teacher. Some backstory though. My cousin's daughter is spoiled as frick. She has 4 TVs, her own iPad, a cell phone, a laptop, every goddamn Barbie you can imagine, and she is 8 years old. And not only that, but she is constantly told she is the best and favorite child, in front of her 2 older siblings, and anything she wants she gets. If she asks someone to get her shoe 2 feet away from her, they will, and if they don't, she throws a freaking tantrum worse than you've ever seen. So this kid is a freaking monster. I blame my cousin. I honestly think the girl has mild autism and maybe ADD from the way she acts, but my cousin doesn't believe in that stuff, and even if he did, his princess is perfect. There is no way she could have those things. Anyway, since the kid is so used to everything being done her way and having everything done for her, she doesn't do well in school because she expects the teacher to do crap her way and she expects good grades. So the teacher called the parents and said, your daughter is having issues in class. You need to work with her in it. So they tried their balls and it did nothing, so the teacher suggested getting her tested. So my cousin decided to go to a homeopathic doctor to get her tested, and they said she has a gluten allergy and that's why she doesn't pay attention. So this is where the stupid crap comes in. They tell the teacher she isn't allowed gluten, but they send her to school with a freaking sandwich and other crap like that. You know, crap with gluten in it. So the teacher calls them up to tell them she was eating gluten, and my cousin says, well, bread isn't gluten. And my cousin was telling this story as if the teacher was the dumb one. Honestly, I feel bad for the kid. She is so freaked up and she won't get anywhere in life until she hits rock bottom, which will probably never happen until my cousin dies because he will take care of her. I work at a preschool. In our 2-year-old rooms, we have a regulation that the kids can't move into the 3-year-old room until they are mostly potty trained. Most of the students in there are 2, with a few that just recently turned 3. There is one boy that is 4. He is not potty trained because, in his mother's words, she doesn't want to force him. He should be in pre-K. Instead, he is in the 2-year-old class for his 3rd year, extremely behind his peers educationally and emotionally, and has a mother that is apparently fine with letting him fail in life through no fault of his own. My sil finally got around to potty training my 5-year-old niece. They went to the open house for kindergarten last spring. Kids started kindergarten in September and asked who changes the kids' pull-ups diapers. The other parents say in stunned silence, and my sil was informed that her daughter was required to be potty trained. Once was in a parent-teacher conference where we were discussing how the parent's son was very low academically and possible testing was going to be needed, otherwise he might be held back a grade. She then stood up and started screaming, in a room full of other parents and teachers, that her son is not freaking retarded and that he in fact did not need to be tested according to her. It was very, very upsetting for her obviously and myself. He is now in 7th grade, barely able to read, and has been held back twice. Also last year a student called me a B in class, so when I called the mom to inform her he'd be serving a lunch detention, she couldn't understand why the last week of school we'd still hold him accountable for his behavior. Wife is a 5th grade teacher and this one family has 3 kids, each one more obnoxious than the one before. The last kid is finally in 5th grade and every teacher is stoked they don't have to deal with this family anymore. They have a granddad who comes to each lunch with this shithead grandson every single day. The granddad was a constant disruption and just an all-around rude guy to the entire staff. Fast forward to the end of the year after the graduation ceremony. My wife is hugging students and chatting with parents, saying their goodbyes for the summer. She notices granddad off to the side kind of sizing her up. He walks over and yanks her arm, so she turns to him while she is in mid-conversation with parents and yells while pointing in her face, I know you don't like my grandson and that's why he got a C, but I am giving you an F, then turns and walks off with the rest of the family. I know you don't like my grandson and that's why he got a C, but I am giving you an F. K. A parent last year apologized for her son's attendance, 45%, because she's had him in counseling for the past 6 months to help him cope with the loss of their hamster. 6 months of therapy for a hamster. Never in my 19 years as an educator did I ever feel guilty for feeling zero sympathy for a chronic attendance excuse. The kid shouldn't have let his psycho friend throw it at a wall. My friend is a teacher at an elementary school. She called me a few nights ago because a 1st grade girl ran out of the school when color time was over. The elderly nurse retrieved her and they took her into the nurse's office to chill out. The little girl then proceeded to scream, I hate your ugly face, Mithurfri ear, and assaulted the nurse. Like stomped her feet, ripped her scrubs and twisted her wrist. The little girl was saying Mithurfri ear like the Asian guy on Hangover and they were trying not to laugh. At one point one of the teachers snorted back laughter and the little girl said, this isn't funny, Mithurfri ear. Finally they got her to calm down by letting her color again. I just realized I totally misread the question. I thought it asked what outrageous thing a student said. I guess for some context, the mom of the little girl seemed to genuinely care that her kid acted like that. Which from the look of things, that might be outrageous because she didn't blame the teachers for it like all the other parents. My wife teaches art. This kindergartner named Damien, of course, said I'm not falling for your tricks this time, in a super creepy voice as she was passing out coloring sheets. I can't even remember all the things this kid did said. He was the omen for real. Apparently my little dollop of sunshine who had a Napoleon complex told mom that I called him retarded. I obviously did not, but his mom came up to the school that day with 3 other kids in tow and yelled at me. This was a very large Latina woman with several face piercings and tattoos. She told me, my son is only allergic to shellfish, so I know for a fact he is not retarded, and then sent me several messages on Facebook after he was suspended later on and failing all of his classes begging me to call her and help them. My mom is a 1st grade teacher. She once had a parent email her telling her to put nothing less than an A on his son's report card because he doesn't want it to hinder his son getting into Harvard. My mom promptly responded that the son was below average and will be given the grade he has earned. But really, 1st grade? Those letter grades in the report card mean almost nothing at that age. It's worth noting that she teaches in a very affluent town and the father was a surgeon at a local hospital who thought his kid was far better than anyone else's. Here at Harvard, we're looking for the very best, James. I see you won the science fair of your state 7 times running. Very impressive. And you've held a grade point average twice as high as your nearest fellow student. Sounds like you're perfect, except you got a B+ in 1st grade. You know where the door is. I had a student once who was this fat ginger kid. I swear, this kid was the Antichrist. He would come into class screaming on the top of his lungs. He would constantly get up out of his seat and just start picking fights with other students. He almost punched a kid who was sharpening his pencil because he looked at him funny. He refused to do any work, so he was failing all his classes. One time he wrote a research paper and left all the blue Wikipedia links in it. I obviously gave him a 0. Anyways, the other teachers and I immediately set up a parent-teacher conference. We state his behavior and our concerns with his grades. The parent sits there listening to us tell story after story how her child is from heck, and she responds with, well, I don't want him to be a robot. This woman didn't care about one thing we said. She just didn't want him to sit in class and act like all the other kids. I'm so glad to be done with that school. Oh, Doyle rules. That I was responsible for the childhood obesity epidemic, with the 20 minutes of homework I gave 3 times a week to high school honors freshmen. Yep. I'm currently a piano performance major and teach piano part-time. During a trial lesson, one mom said, I want my son to learn piano but I don't want to buy a piano. It'll be a waste of money. I explained that she could buy a cheaper electric keyboard. She then proceeds to tell me, but I don't want to waste too much money on this small hobby. I don't want him to become a musician and waste his life away. It hurt as I sat there, shocked by this insensitive woman telling a musician that her life is a waste. Thanks, lady. I teach in a city in which there are a lot of minorities. Recently, a parent was very loudly complaining because there were more of one minority than of her own. She's of African descent. She accused teachers of preferring this other minority to the black students and said that there aren't enough black people on staff. Then she denigrated one of the 2 black members of staff because the individual in question didn't look black enough. Maybe the issue stems from her child's recurring habit of attacking people, including biting other students. But don't tell her that. Hey, I got a crazy idea. We should put garbage bags on the children's heads. Had a parent pull her son from my class because he made a gay friend and was afraid he was going to be debauched by his new friend. No joke, those were the mother's words. Sad part was that the student really enjoyed the class and was probably going to head to college in that field. My mom was pregnant with my sister in 1971, teaching high school English. Some kid pulled a knife and put it to her obviously pregnant belly and demanded a better grade. She called the parents. The boy's mom said, well, he sounds serious. Can you give him a B? She noped the frick out of there in a hurry. Every year our orchestra students go on a tour to the elementary schools in the area. Since they're missing a full day of school for it, the rule is that they have to have at least a C in all classes to go on the trip. Kiddo has a D in my class, has done minimal work and tanked most tests and quizzes but at least a C in every other class. Day of the trip he walks in with one missing assignment which is nowhere near enough to bring the grade up so he can go on the trip. He walks out of my room in tears. I am not moved. I get a phone call not 5 minutes later from his irate mother telling me what a horrible person I am, how I am the worst teacher ever, blah, blah, blah. Apparently not going on this one trip was going to ruin his entire year, possibly his entire life, and I am a soul-sucking demon who should feel horrible for crushing his dreams. After she yelled at me for 20 minutes, she called the principal and yelled at her. Principal backed me up, reffing. Since she didn't get her way, mom got super pissy and picked him up from school. So this evil child realizes you can kill birds by throwing potato chips in front of cars that race down the highway beside the school. After some effort, said child gets the timing perfect and succeeds. The kids cheer, child becomes lord of the flies, and I'm tasked with calling the mother to tell her that this isn't acceptable behavior. At first the mother was just silent. She absorbed the story before saying alright Mrs. Too Cool for sure, I'll talk to my child about it tonight. I should have known it couldn't have been that easy. The following day I received the call. I'll never forget it. There was no way her child had killed that bird and I was an idiot for thinking her child was at fault. I argued about witnesses and facts for a bit before her logic went fully AWOL. Mrs. Too Cool for sure, do you know anything about birds? As much as the next person I guess. Well, I know a lot about birds. They're very shrewd creatures, and if the bird went under that car tire it was because it wanted to commit suicide. You could have heard a pin drop. Most awkward exit to a phone call I've ever had. Note to self, don't call that parent again. Person I know was previously a preschool teacher, and at the beginning of the year 17/24 parents, yes they counted, asked what would happen if their child was too advanced for the activities. 71% of parents thought their child was brilliant. Me, you need to sign these incident reports. Your son keeps hitting other kids. Mother, he doesn't understand what he is doing. He won't stop hitting me unless I start to cry. Me, speechless. I'm a preschool teacher. This kid weighs like 20 pounds when wet. I had a parent of a 12th grade student ask me to change her son's grade from a 9th grade class in which I taught him so he could apply for more scholarships. I did not do it and was fully supported by admin. Well, I believed you until you said that. Not a teacher, but my mother is. She was doing parent-teacher conferences and was complimenting one father on his son's performance, and his reply was simply, "Thank you, I made him myself." Worth noting the father was an immigrant and didn't speak English as his first language. Top tier dad joke. I taught in a rough city neighborhood, mostly streams of profanity, yup, from parents, and earnest explanations that the reason the kid wouldn't behave in my class is because I didn't beat their butt for misbehavior. I used to teach elementary in an urban school. A few of my kids told me straight up that they didn't have to listen because they knew I wasn't allowed to beat them. Frustrating and heartbreaking at the same time. Well, I am a doctor, you know. Great. I didn't ask. She's 3 and she's already ahead of everyone else. They bumped her up to this room after some violence issues, but also because she is more mature than the others. Do you think she needs an easier bag? After her child had a complete meltdown because she was too lazy to put her things away and, instead, called the task hard. This is the same parent of the mature, smarter, violent child above. I want to talk to you. This place looks like a pigsty. You might want to take some ownership of the space and let people know this isn't a dumping ground, said the headmaster, also a school parent, after he dumped a good portion of the items there himself. He was dead serious, too. Although not a teacher, my mom and stepdad both work at a university. One day in high school I got assigned to work on this group project with this kid who I was friendly with. The day before the project is due I look at the document and nothing has been completed. I proceed to call his house and his parents pick up. I had heard his parents were pretty overprotective, so I acted super polite and was just like, "Could you please remind child to work on the project. Well, they had none of that. I proceed to get screamed at by this kid's father on how I was very lazy etc etc. My mom the meantime was sort of standing there watching. He then asks to speak to my father and I say, my parents are divorced. My mother is here however. He then proceeds to call me a motherfucking liar and at this point my mother rips the phone out of my hand and begins tearing him a new one. And then, the most asinine thing ever comes out of this mouth. You can't talk to me like this, I'm a doctor. My mom, who is also a doctor, sort of sarcastically says, yeah, what kind? He proudly proclaims, I'm an oncologist at Unrealistic. My mom by this point has the phone on speaker. She quickly runs over to me and asks me his last name with a devious look in her eyes. He then proceeds to insult her and insists that he would beat the crap out of her if he saw her in person because she was so disrespectful to him. At this point my mom says, well doctor, so and so my name is doctor, and I am the head oncologist at Unrealistic. My stepdad is also there and he says I am doctor, head of HR at Unrealistic. His voice must have raised 2 octaves. He recognized exactly who both of them were. He just sits there silent and says, oh, my mom literally just said straight up there, at work you will report directly to my husband's office. I am going to charge you with harassment. And then she hung up. I finished the project on my own and the kid ended up moving away a couple months later after they fired his dad. TLDR, don't mess with my mother. I so want this to be true. Not a teacher, but I work at an after-school daycare at an elementary school. I once had a parent threaten to have their child pee on the floor of our classroom if we didn't unlock the bathroom for her, the mother. We have a strict child-only policy for certain restrooms in our district to protect the children, and faculty in the office had already been locked by the janitor. She said her child would pee on our floor. She told me to stop helping 2 kids, one had a bad nosebleed and the other was puking, so I could change her child's diaper so she could go home. All this talk about police wearing body cameras, maybe teachers should wear them too. Evidence against crappy freaking kids. A father showed up absolutely s-faced to a 9:30 AM meeting. Told the principal, the head of the special education for the area and me we were stupid who were at fault for his son's behavior. I stared in horror. The principal and head of spec ed told him he was an idiot and was lucky they weren't calling the police to remove him, and they would no longer be consulting him around the best course of action regarding his kid's education since he clearly had not a clue. Kid didn't complete end of year project. Give her in detail what assignments are missing. Then focuses on special needs students and wants to know why they had it easier. I almost fell over. What a C. I teach English. Had a parent complain that their 5YO wasn't speaking a lot during parent observation, and when I asked how much he study at home the reply was, oh, we don't help him study. I wanted to slap that parent. Don't complain if you don't put in the effort with your kid. I'm working in Japan as an English teacher. Worked at 3 different places. The second place was in the greater Tokyo area, and I was in charge of preschool for a short time. This one kid was IDK. Something wasn't all right up there. He was generally sweet and could occasionally display some stroke of genius, understood same and different very quickly and could parrot the correct English if asked, but just off somehow. He would come in with laced up, shin-high leather boots which were a pain in the butt to take off when he needed to toilet, would present a tripping hazard if we went to the park, etc. We asked his mother if they could invest in some cheap trainers or Crocs, and she said she couldn't. We asked why. Her exact words, my husband wants him to be more fashionable than the other children. She did eventually get him Crocs. Very expensive, adorned with Thomas the Tank Engine noise making badges once, but it suddenly became apparent why this kid was a bit lacking. His parents are children themselves. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.